In this session, we're looking at relationship category 3, which is relationship with existence, and common issues that lead to suffering within that category. And today we are discussing feeling betrayed by life. As we enter into this discussion, I ask that we all put aside our preconceived ideas and notions. I suggest that as we go through this introductory section, you listen, not to agree or disagree, not to compare what I am saying with what you already believe, but simply to hear what's being said on its own terms. So that means setting aside the inner commentary as far as possible, the subtle nods of approval, the silent rebuttals, the mental filing system of right and wrong, true or false. Instead, I invite you to listen like someone hearing something for the first time, even if the words seem familiar. I don't mean with passive acceptance. I mean with open attention. Again, as far as possible, lay aside the lens of personal background, training, your role or any role, or your expectations. Listen as a present and aware human being. When I'm finished going through the introductory section, there will be time for questions, reflections, comments, etc. The most valuable thing we can do at the moment, as far as is humanly possible, is to temporarily suspend the habit of interpretation. So, feeling betrayed by life, how it shows up for the individual. They question why bad things happen to them. They feel singled out by misfortune. They have a feeling of being spiritually penalized. There is a feeling of deep resentment toward fate or the nature of reality, and a deep sense that life is unfair, arbitrary, or personally hostile. Now, I have a note on that last one. A deep sense that life is unfair, arbitrary, or personally hostile points to a core, often unspoken belief within the person that life itself is out to get them. So not just that life is difficult, but that life is fundamentally unjust or indifferent in a way that feels personal. It shows up when someone feels that no matter what they do, life won't meet them halfway, as if there's an invisible force working against them. Nothing they try seems to make a real difference. The rules feel rigged, and the suffering feels targeted. This is a deeply rooted mistrust of life's unfolding, rather than just frustration with circumstances. It's a worldview where randomness is seen by the individual to equate to threat, and where the mind can no longer see challenge without interpreting it as punishment. It's about how one interprets what happens through a lens of betrayal, futility, or existential unfairness, rather than being about what's actually happening. In that state, even neutral or ordinary events can feel loaded with meaning or malice. So when someone feels betrayed by existence or betrayed by life, they may make such statements as, life isn't fair, or I did everything right and life still punished me. And they might ask questions like, why did this happen to me? Okay, I've got a little video to play at this point. So I'm just going to go to share screen.
A devout clergyman sought every opportunity to impress upon the mind of his son the fact that God is good and cares about all of his creatures. Happening one day to see a heron foraging in the quest for food, the good man pointed out to his son the perfect adaptation of the heron to get his living in that manner. "See," he said, "what a long, slender, and powerful bill he has. What perfectly curved and strong neck muscles he has. Observe how nicely he picks his feet up and puts them back down again without making the slightest disruption. He is thus enabled to approach his lunch without giving them any notice of his arrival. My son," he said, "it is impossible to look at that bird without recognizing the design as well as the goodness of God in thus providing the means of subsistence for his creatures." "Yes," replied the boy, "I think I see the goodness of God, at least as far as the heron is concerned. But after all, Father, don't you think the arrangement is a little bit tough on the squirrel?"
Okay, so the emotional results of feeling betrayed by life will include bitterness, despair, and spiritual disillusionment. The physical results might include exhaustion, a tight solar plexus, and withdrawal from creativity or spontaneity. The distortion or error in one's thinking when they feel betrayed by life will include or might include assuming life is supposed to follow a predictable moral logic based on goodness, effort, or belief. They might also believe that life operates on fairness as defined by human standards. And thirdly, they treat existence like a contract that they didn't sign, expecting fairness based on human values. One last thing I want to share before we go into the discussion. Within philosophy, there exists an allegory where life is likened to a group of children sitting in eager anticipation of a grand performance, only to find the show tedious, disappointing, and not worth the wait. It's said to be a haunting metaphor for the illusion of life's promise and how hope gives way to disillusionment, not just once, but as a fundamental structure of existence. So, to begin, can I ask, first of all, if anyone feels or has ever felt that way, betrayed by life?
Sander, I had something to say before, but I wasn't able to say it.
Go ahead.
I find the video very disturbing,
Okay.
and your question there was when I, in the past, came to a place of feeling betrayed by life, it was because I had set my expectations too high. And I feel personally, when we come to this place of feeling betrayed by life, rather than sit down, we can turn it around and look at it as a challenge.
The feelings there, I have felt them, but I did not term them as feeling betrayed by life. It was, for me, it translated as misunderstanding, but it is like everything you said there described how I felt, except that I called it something different.
Can I ask what you called it?
Yeah, I would say like a kind of a feeling of misunderstanding, missing something, and constantly trying to figure out what it was.
I have three questions, three possible questions. One for people who have felt that way, maybe two, but certainly one for people who have felt that way. I have another question for people who are sure that they've never felt that way, and another question for people who aren't sure whether they've felt that way or not. Before I go any further, I just want to point out that people let us down all the time. Not everyone will betray us, for sure, but people do let us down. So when we're talking about feeling betrayed by life, we have to, in some way, make a distinction between people and circumstances. In the feelings part, I wanted to put the word depression because when I was in the throes of depression, part of that was I felt that life was futile. So, in that sense, I felt that life had let me down. It wasn't what I expected. I was like one of those kids. Incidentally, and you know, in the waiting for the great show to start, I remember that when I actually forgot about this and never put it in my notes. When I was putting this together, I remembered it was the summer holidays and the local school was obviously closed for the summer holidays, but the gymnasium was opened up. So local primary school. And they opened up the gymnasium and they had big massive screen, big white screen and a projector. And basically it was an afternoon of cartoons for kids. And I distinctly remember sitting or standing actually at the back of the room watching all the kids. There must have been 100, easy. That could be an exaggeration of my childhood mind, but there were certainly a lot of kids there. And it was an absolute rabble. They were not sitting in eager anticipation for the great show to start. Far from it. There was some were fighting, some were they were laughing, joking, running around. And I stood at the back of the room, I remember distinctly, thinking, there is absolutely no way I'm going to sit here and try and watch a cartoon with all this going on around me. I would hazard the guess that I was about 11 years of age. So even then, I wouldn't have used the words at the time, but the insanity of society was certainly on my mind in some way, shape, or form. Did I feel let down in that moment? No. Well, yeah, actually, I did because I'd been to the movies, I'd been to the pictures, and everybody was pretty well behaved, and I just didn't want to be there, and I left. Just another example from my own experience that is pertinent at this time. I'll start first of all with a question for those who feel that they have experienced feeling betrayed by life. So let me pose this question. If life were a person, what kind of relationship would you say you've had with it so far? And how would you describe the betrayal?
When I was very immature, I always felt betrayed by life. And having been subject to different degrees of mental illness, depression, as you alluded to previously, can really make us feel that everything is against us, verging on paranoia. But I think that as we mature and we look at things differently, then we realize that life itself is a journey and a challenge. And I think we have to realize we have to come to a place to be strong enough to meet these challenges. But as well as that, you were saying that circumstances, is it circumstances or people that we feel betrayed by? But surely sometimes people are behind the circumstances which lead to us feeling betrayed. So there again, we have to look further and look, I think, from my point of view, what exactly is happening within the person who is causing the circumstances and why we're responding in the way that we respond.
It's never about the other person. It's only ever about what's going on inside the individual, the self.
Well, I would say that whatever is going on inside of us, right, it is sometimes useful to look at the other person because occasionally the other person is holding a mirror where we are looking at ourselves and we can see subconsciously in the other person what's happening within ourselves. You know, if I just might quote something, there were two very holy men who were sitting, and one said to the other, I see Jesus in you. And the other one said, no, it's the Jesus in you who sees the Jesus in me.
But somewhere in philosophical thought, it says that it's impossible to stand outside of oneself and look at oneself. It's also impossible to look at the other, any other person. It's impossible to look at the other with any lens other than personal experience.
You see, I don't agree with that.
To me, it sounds very similar to the quote you just made.
Mm-hmm. But I don't agree with the part which says it's impossible to stand outside of yourself.
Okay. I can't make an argument for it. It's not my quote. I have never once been able to stand it. I have to go inside. I have to be aware of my inward from my own experience. I haven't been able to separate myself from myself in order
Okay.
to observe myself. I can only do that from within. Personally, I find the whole idea of separation absolutely ludicrous.
Why do you find it ludicrous?
It doesn't make sense to me.
Because it's obvious if you go into it that everything what I experience from inside myself, and I cannot see the world different than what I have inside me. Thoughts, feelings, mental images, perceptions. So what is out is in me through the way I'm looking at, feeling it, and so on. Everywhere I go, I take myself with myself, yeah. And I think that that thing is very, very obvious to me. It can seem like it isn't, but I came to conclusion that what I have said, not explaining the way I would like to because of time and so on, not going into it. So inside, always inside. What I'm experiencing, it's always inside of me. And there's no barbed wire.
An example I came up with a metaphor at one point. It was the best metaphor I could think of. This was a couple of years ago in the old group. We were talking about the very same or something very similar. And said, if you imagine all of existence, as far as we can imagine that, as a big bowl of soup, and within that bowl of soup, we have planet Earth. And if we go further with the bowl of soup analogy, then planet Earth might be the smallest piece of soup ingredient, carrot, whatever. And upon that smallest piece of ingredient, there will be perhaps microbes. Now, don't want to take this to a point of stupidity, but everything contained, every small piece of ingredient is part of the whole. Although it looks separate, we perceive it as separate. It is the soup. It's all contained there.
Yeah. I have heard that analogy as well, that everything is at the end of this one thing, one complete thing. And it's very good, that analogy, actually. So how do you equate that with then what we were talking about earlier, about stand outside of ourselves and looking in, or the inability to do that?
We have perception. Bats perceive sound by sonar. We have 5 senses. We know them all, right? There's 5 of them. There might even be another one. But we have the 5 physical senses of sight, touch, hearing, so on, right? From our surroundings, we get information. Sense perception gives us information. That information is interpreted in the brain, which exists in a dark box and will never see the outside world other than through the 5 senses. It's in a black box. It interprets the information. Experience adds to the information. All of this gives us the perception of separation. I'm separate from you, separate from Demir, separate from Aisha, separate from the table, the cat, the dog, the door. All these things exist and are, in fact, to go back to that analogy, ingredients within the soup. It's all contained in the one, although it appears to us, because we live in the world of form, we can't experience the whole, W-H-O-L-E. We can't experience the entirety of existence, which is why we doubt existence and sometimes feel betrayed or let down or whatever by life, by experience, because that's how we are given to perceive our existence, our environment.
Right. When you say there's 5 senses, I think there are 6 senses actually. And the 6th one being is a sense to be aware of our 5 senses.
Let's save that one for another discussion. That might be coming up on the page.
I just want to finish by saying that when you use the analogy, when anybody uses the analogy of a big bowl of soup, someone had to make the soup.
Yeah. Because we talk about creation, we assume there is a creator. That's why I prefer the word existence.
Very interesting. Thank you for your time listening to me.
Okay. I want to go on now, and Aisha, you said that you had felt that way, felt betrayed by life. To repeat the question for you, if life were a person, what kind of relationship would you say you've had with it so far? And how would you describe the betrayal?
If life was a person, I would say my relationship was maybe I would say a person of totally different language, like couldn't understand or felt understood by. Yeah, felt misunderstood by. So something about like, yeah, that was it. Like that kind of relationship.
Right. How would you describe the betrayal? Was there really a betrayal?
No, I wouldn't call it, again, like, I said, I wouldn't call it a betrayal, but confusion, I would say. Right now, it's hard to remember, like, I know, like, when you describe these feelings, that's a lot of them, that's how I felt. But from this place, it's hard to remember, like, exactly how it was, because it's easier to see how I see it now.
So I'm going to answer the question myself. I have a very short answer, actually. If life was a person, what kind of relationship would I say I've had with it so far? I would say that the relationship has been, at times, especially my first maybe 35, 40 years, maybe longer, has been a volatile relationship with this person called life. More recently, my relationship has been one of ease, certainly since 2012. And how would I describe the betrayal? So we're talking the first part of that. I only thought that life had betrayed me. It wasn't it was a feeling, it wasn't a thought. It was a feeling. I felt let down as opposed to betrayed. It was never what I expected it was going to be. Never. Or if it ever was, it's a very, very small percentage of the time. If life was a person, life is an ass. Or at least life was an ass until I found out, until I realised that it was never going to be what I expected it to be. That it wasn't meant to be what I expected it to be. The very first line in the book, The Road Less Travelled, says something like, life is difficult. Once you realise that life is difficult, then it becomes not quite so difficult. And that's how, in a way, what happened for me, except I would say life didn't become less difficult, it became more easy. It became easy because I understood it. I understood my part in it. Mary Ann mentioned a quote when I asked her to say something when we were testing the audio at the start, and it went something like, life is a story told by, I don't know if it was an idiot or a fool or something. And I would agree with that 100%.
Yeah.
I was the idiot who was carrying the story that was my life. And we all do that. I mentioned that in the last session. Aisha, is there anything else you would like to say? I'm going to come to you in a second, Amir.
Yeah, I used to think that I needed to figure out life because I realized I didn't understand life and I was confused by life. And well, what it feels now, like what it feels like I am life and life is peace.
Here we get to the crunch, don't we? Because if we look outside of the human experience, the sphere of humanity, we see herons and lions. We see herons eating squirrels. I wonder if it would not have been quite so disturbing if that squirrel was a fish. We have lions attacking gazelle. I wonder how the gazelle feels. I wonder if it feels betrayed by life, or if it's just part of the unfolding, much like the squirrel going down the gullet of the heron. And whatever other example, peace is everywhere, but we have thunderstorms, we have earthquakes, we have floods. It would be easy to live in an area where one of these natural disasters occur, unfold, and feel let down by life, feel betrayed by life. That would be the easiest misunderstanding to make because, as I said in an audio I listened to, one of my own, the only thing we ever hear about in the news are the things that affect humans. We don't hear about the other things. You know, when a tree falls or 10 acres has disappeared from the Amazon forest or something like that in the past 2 months or whatever. That only gets reported very occasionally, and usually in a special program. It's never a news headline. We're very self-centered, these
Yeah.
human beings we are.
Even if it's reported in the way that it would affect humans, even if
Yes,
it affects the environment. Most of it, yeah.
yes.
Yeah, every part of it, it's controlling. Yeah, on
Mm.
point to have a certain result, emotional, mental. So it's governing masses and the way they are seeing and portraying life. It's artificial and skewed from the get-go. When you scratch the surface, you come upon lie, upon lie, upon lie, yeah,
Yes.
and manipulation and every part of the color, yeah, it's skewed from social aspect, cultural, every point of society, yeah, but there is always me, myself, and I, yeah, in that picture, of course.
Yep. And on the grand scale of existence, human existence, self is human existence.
You know, when you were talking about was it hurricanes or something like one of those disasters you said? So initially, I thought my first thought was about how I would feel maybe experiencing that. And then I remembered, okay, I don't know how it feels because I haven't been there. I'm assuming that I wouldn't like it. Like I would feel betrayed by it. But when I remember, like people from my hometown, I remember then when it rains, maybe there has been a heavy wind and they've come to our house. And I remember, like when they asked, how was the rain? Like
Hmm.
for me, I would have thought that, someone's roof being torn off and, such. I would have termed it, even when I was little, as, devastation or destruction. But then I would hear them say, the rain has done repairs. That's what they used to say. And you could see that from their demeanor. They mean it. They don't feel that it has destroyed anything of theirs. They just feel that it has done repairs. And that is it. Like it passes and they fix whatever needs to be fixed and they go on. Yeah, so I see that even staying in a place with hurricanes and other things, it's all in the eyes of the beholder. Everybody's going to have a different experience.
Yes, absolutely. Here's a question for people who think that they have never felt betrayed by life. Have you ever witnessed someone else's deep suffering and thought, that's just not fair? The squirrel, perhaps?
My mother, let's say, when I was a child, and what was happening in my childhood, after childhood, very severe life, yeah. But I didn't have I couldn't call that life. I called that people and environment, not like life is doing that to me.
Yeah, people are the worst, actually. I don't mean that as some sort of emotional cushion, like, I actually mean what I'm saying. I don't know how you, Aisha, how you perceive that saying of your relatives that the rain has done repairs. I think nature is always doing repairs, and removing some of what we do, humans, is very much, well, okay, a big part of that repair.
Yeah, by our stupidity, and there's so many points on human stupidity, and there have been many people who have come through the history who have had approach to nature which was scientifically, environmentally, in a harmony, yeah, in a harmony, and drawing, let's say, resources which are possible to bring in a most better way than it is now, but they were squashed by greed
Yeah.
and other aspects of society. Yeah. So there is always that aspect of malice or no regard to other person. Absolutely no care, only the power and enjoying in suffering of others. Yeah, which I have seen. Yeah.
Reminds me of some of the things that's going on around the world right now. Honestly, I don't mean to be.
Yeah, the things are as they are. Yeah, you know, when the curtain drops, you cannot not see certain things. Yeah, and I cannot bamboozle myself that I am not seeing certain things as they are, and I can name them. Yeah, what I perceive as this, that, and the other. Yeah, but that doesn't mean that it will change anything. Some aspects can be, let's say, targeting upon me. Yeah, if I talk too much. Yeah, which I have experienced. So I think I don't need to go into it or to explain more, because every one of you has seen certain things in life which is not okay. Yeah, definitely.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, the first thing I thought of when you said your mother was my wife's death. You know, I hadn't thought of that up until that point. She suffered for a whole year. Did I feel let down by life? I don't know if she did. I just coped the best I could, I suppose, at that time. Although, you know, I wasn't a child. I was an adult, obviously. I see it as a solution that we offer no solutions during these Zoom calls. We're not trying to make people feel better. The heron and squirrel video was the best image I could come up with of the harshness of life. Coming from the perspective of always seeking truth, that was important to me. And so it wasn't intended to be jarring, wasn't intended to challenge in any way, although I suspected it would. Because, as I said, you know, would it have been more palatable if it was the image of a seagull eating a fish or a crab? Because we expect that. Because a fish is a lesser life form. Or an anteater eating ants. Because an ant is a lesser life form, apparently. So what I'm saying is this is meant to be challenging. If it were easy, we would be doing the exact same thing as everybody else is doing, and I don't want to do that. Because my perspective, my life, my living, the way I perceive life, the way that I enjoy life now, despite the trials and tribulations that have come up and will come up in the future, my living didn't improve, my perspective didn't improve because life got easy all of a sudden. It became easy because I saw reality for what it is. You know, that everything is reaction. Everything is perspective, everything is interpretation, that which I suggested we suspend at the beginning. Everything is through the lens of right and wrong, good and bad, and how I judge what I perceive through the 5 physical senses.
Preconceive and then adding on that seeming meaning. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any last words before we end this session? And we'll go ladies first. Aisha, would you like to say anything before we end?
Yeah, like what I was saying earlier when you asked if it was a fish or something like that, if it had been any less disturbing. So what came to mind was maybe the less something is like us, maybe then the less disturbing it is. The farther, because, a squirrel will be a mammal, and, it's not a conclusion, but sort of like a question, like I'm asking myself that, so the less, is it because a fish is farther away from me than a squirrel? Or, as you said, or is it because we're somehow, like, I would have expected the fish is food to heron or whatever. Like, so it's questions it raises. And what I saw after that was, am I insensitive to a fish if it were being hurt? Because if it's the natural order of things, would a fish be better off being in the heron? So like those are all questions that came in. So it just comes back to how I view life again. Is not making assumptions, seeking understanding, and questioning the conclusions again.
Yeah, I'm just going to quickly say before I go to Demir that, but you touched on another facet of this very same sort of or similar philosophical discussion, and that is the view that because humanity suffers so much, this comes from the pessimistic philosophical view, as far as I know, that because humans suffer so much, would it be better to never have been born? The reason I'm saying that is because of your words saying, would the fish be better off in the heron? Yeah. So just more to think about, perhaps, if you wish to do so. Demir, would you like to come in with any sort of final words?
Yeah, it's funny to me, like when a doctor said, you have, I don't know, or somebody, a few moments to live, would you say something? How to zip, yeah, compress. What would I like to say, yeah, before the end of this episode, yeah. Yeah, there are many things, so I will leave it alone for now. Yeah, just to say that nothing is shocking to me anymore because of the things I have seen in human behavior. Yeah, I'd say that, and in beliefs, preconceived beliefs in which I suffer. Yeah, which I'm fed up. So not wanting to suffer, definitely, because I have done that through time, repeating over and over and over and over and over, which is quite different from the statement that we are all and so on, yeah? So in what universe I live? In my own, yeah? Yeah, that would be for this episode.
During my years of doing this sort of discussion in Belfast, we'd done an exercise that I found in a book somewhere. The exercise was called Design Your Own God, and it was based on the Abrahamic religions. And we went through a whole series of questions, ideas, and that sort of thing about God being all-seeing, all-knowing, and if God could see everything, would these things happen? And I can't go into any great detail, but that was something of what was contained in it. So we looked at all these ideas, and we had all manner of how people see these things. And the conclusion was that life is as it is, and this is the best of all possible worlds. I was quite happy to agree with that at that time. That was 10 years or more ago. I don't even think that matters, whether this is the best possible world that can exist, or could it be better. I think the question is absolutely, again, it's unimportant. This is what we live with. Life is the way it is. That's what I'm saying. So I want to finish with one question. And this is something that you can take away with whether you're on this call. And for anyone listening to the replay, something to consider over and above, or at least in addition to what has been discussed so far. And it is designed to uncover any low-level mistrust or quiet disillusionment that hasn't yet surfaced as conscious betrayal. So the question is, do you feel a subtle tension or guardedness when you think about the future, as if you're bracing for life to disappoint you?